Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. VR news for August 22nd. Just a quick follow-up to the thank you that I posted yesterday's news video, guys. Just case in point on that was the story about the 3-in-1 cable. You know, we reported it yesterday, and I say we because it came from you guys. It was available on Reddit, but none of the major VR sites had talked about it. Most of them are talking about it today. So it's that kind of stuff. Just hats off to you guys that I really appreciate it. Any other kind of content stuff you guys want to see, leave it in the comments below. I do read them all, even if I don't answer them all. And yeah, keep that stuff coming. It's awesome. Totally appreciate it. Let us jump into the news. The first news piece has to do with one of my favorite politician-like, slick-talking VPs in the gaming world. It's none other than Oculus VP Nate Mitchell. And he was asked some pretty hard-hitting questions by Uploadvr that had to do with the launch, right, of the Rift, the Oculus Touch, etc. Let's look at some of his answers. So the first thing he was asked, if he could have a do-over with the launch, were there things they regret? And of course, he gave the politician's answer, where they talk a lot but really don't say anything. And obviously, if they could go back in time and fix the damn supply chain issue, they would go and fix it, right? They wouldn't hesitate for a second. So you're not fooling anyone, but he can't say that. I understand that as well. He's got to have the public face. Look, these are the guys that brought VR back to the forefront, right? In 2012. And it just doesn't look good if they acknowledge having missed the boat on things like controllers, etc., screwing up supply chain. It just doesn't make sense for them to admit to that. They're the godfathers. They brought this back, right? And they're acting as such. And I get that. Now, he was asked about the Oculus Touch as well, and he was asked about the functionality and if they regret not having launched with the Oculus Touch. And I liked his answer for this one because, again, it was just complete politician's answer. He basically said that, look, using 2012 again, we have a relationship, or we have a long-standing relationship with devs going back to 2012 when we launched the Kickstarter. It wouldn't be fair to them if, the games that they had been developing for mouse, keyboard, and gamepad suddenly required the Oculus Touch. So we couldn't change course midstream, blah, 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 blah. And end result, they're coming out with it later. Yeah. Complete and utter BS is what my BS radar tells me. Do I have proof? Do I have evidence? No. Gut instinct, and that's about it. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I am. I think that's how it played out, right? Again, if they could go back and launch with touch-style controllers, they would have. There's been negatives for them, but there's also been positives. Time being the big positive, right? Negative being missing the opportunity to get critical mass and have this in every Rift owner's hands, right? So I wasn't surprised by the answers he gave. He had to say those things, right? But absolutely, if they had an opportunity to do a do-over, they would take it. And then the last question he was asked about that was, look, are you going to consider this like a Rift 2.0 launch? And he indicated no. But again, I think there is going to be a lot of fanfare. This isn't going to be just it's available in retail stores now. No, this is going to be fanfare backed. We're launching, right? Probably not a Rift 2.0, but I would say like a 1.0B. It's going to be important to them, very important, because the time and R&D that they've spent on this thing, they need it to be successful, right? So again, I get the answers, absolutely. Now, speaking of the touch, there's one application specifically that author from Road to VR tried, and it's called Ripcoil. And it basically plays and looks like a futuristic version of the disc Tron, right? In Tron, the reboot specifically. And Apparently, it has some fast locomotion that really works, right? They didn't talk a lot about it in the article, but it's one to keep an eye on. But what I did like is what he said about it. Now, the positives are that the touch has unique functionality for really making you feel like you're holding and throwing discs. You feel like this cyber athlete, right? But then his last statement was the best. And I'm going to quote him exactly here. He goes, Ripcoil makes you feel like a disc-throwing futuristic badass. But I wonder if that feeling will start to wear thin after an hour of playing something that is essentially a first-person game of Pong. Bingo, pure win, nailed it. Exactly. It looks great, production values are good, and it's one thing to inject new life into a platformer, right? An adventure game, a sports game. Are you going to be able to have the same impact for something that amounts to a game of Pong? And that'll be the real question, right? Even wave-based shooters are infinitely more advanced than a simple game of Pong. So we'll see if it's something people get tired of, or hey, if it's priced right and it even just serves as a good introductory tutorial to the Oculus Touch, then I suppose it served a purpose, right? Looks good, gives you an idea of what the Touch is capable of, and then sends you on your way to enjoy Touch in other games. Fair enough. Price point will help determine that, though. Next news piece deals with a company hoping to do a Kickstarter using Thunderbolt technology to create essentially what amounts to an external GPU, using Thunderbolt to connect to the Vive or the Rift, right? So that MacBook owners can experience virtual reality. And I think that's great. I think it's a good idea, but you've got to ask yourself at the end of the day, are you really playing it on a MacBook? Or are you really only a few steps away from just connecting this thing to a monitor and playing it there? Because let's be real, the GPU is by far doing the majority of the work here, right? And they'll have to work out stuff like latency, all those things. Because I know with the Vive, having tried different types of HDMI cables, it needs the faster, more modern versions of the HDMI specification. It doesn't work on 1.0, for example, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they come in the market. The other consideration to factor in is, look, you're still not going to be able to play this on OS X. You're going to require Boot Camp because it's still only Windows compatible, right? There is, as of yet, no Rift Vive functionality in OS X. So again, at the end of the day, are you really playing it on a MacBook, right? I guess the answer would technically still be yes, because you're saving some money, but external factors are doing all the work, right? So price point is going to be key on that thing, in my opinion. Where are they going to price this thing when they come to market, right? Are they even going to make the Kickstarter successful? And it hasn't formally launched yet, so we'll have to wait and see. And hopefully we'll find out and know some more. Now, this next news piece deals with one of my favorite voice actors, Jon Rhys-Davies. In my opinion, right up there with James Earl Jones, Morgan Freeman, Tom Baker. And yeah, those would probably be my top four. Those guys could seriously read a phone book and I would be entertained. I just love listening to them, right? Anyways, Jon Rhys-Davies from Lord of the Rings Gimli fame, right? And man, what was that sci-fi show I used to... Sliders, I think it was called, that I used to watch him on. Anyways, it was a fun show. But he does the narration for a ballet experience / game called La Peri, Firebird La Peri. Now, this is apparently based on a French ballet production and launched with HTC Vive in April. Now, this thing passed the author by, it passed me by, I wasn't even aware of it. Now, I really don't look for ballet stuff in music, so that kind of makes sense to me, but the part that twigged me here was the author saying that this is supposedly one of the best room scale VR experiences to be had on the Vive, right? So just with that statement, I was sold. I've purchased it. I think it was $10 Canadian on the Steam store, and I'm going to try it out. Plus, it's got Jon Rhys-Davies, right? So for $10, it's worth checking out. If it's good, I'm going to share it on the channel, or even if it isn't, right? If it's something worth showing. But you play the hero Ixander, that one I do not know how to pronounce, even though I'm a Lord of the Rings fiend. But the action takes place around you, right? So you are that hero. The ballerina performs for you, or the ballet artist, right? And the action takes place around you as the central figure. So, yeah, I'm definitely curious. As soon as this news bit is done, that's what I'm going to be trying out and probably recording, because I'm really, really curious. Next story deals with some pictures that have been making the rounds the last few days, and they are those PlayStation 4 Slim photos. And a bunch of people thought they were fake, not real. Well, it's been confirmed by the person who took the original pictures and verified by Eurogamer staff that went over to this fella's house to see it, that it does in fact exist, right? And that got me thinking, exactly what is Sony, what's their plan, right? And what I mean by that is they're also planning the PS4K Neo launch. Which is going to come first? And is this new Slim simply going to be an alternative for the existing PS4, i.e. the same base hardware? Or is it going to include the newer hardware that's in the PS4K Neo? That's the question that I don't have an answer for, because it doesn't make sense any other way to launch those things at the same time. Like, to me, it would be almost like unless you're really that sure that the people who buy the Slim aren't going to be your hardcore VR people, I just don't know how that makes sense. And here's why. If we look at the spec difference, so what I did was just compiled a quick little table to look at the spec differences between the base 4 the base PlayStation 4 and the PS4K Neo, which I'll just call Neo from now on. So the base has 8 cores, CPU cores running at 1.6 gigahertz versus 8 running at 2.1 on the Neo. It's about a 30% difference. GPU 18 at 800 megahertz versus 36 at 911. Okay, significant difference there as well. Double, with quite a bit more bandwidth, right? Not necessarily double, but a lot more bandwidth. Memory, both have 8 gigs of DDR5 RAM, but the base runs at 165 gigabytes per second for bandwidth. The Neo 218, and that's about 24% difference. So you can see the Neo, yeah, that's enough to make a difference for virtual reality for sure, to improve the latency. So again, it begs the question, which is going to come first, and what specs is the Slim going to have hardware-wise, right? So I guess we will wait and see and find out when it's actually here. And we're getting pretty close. Last thing I wanted to talk about rides on the coattails of yesterday's story where I talked about augmented reality for stuff like Dungeons & Dragons. And I had a few of you come back with some awesome link suggestions, thanks for that, on VR tabletop stuff, right? So this kind of fits into those stories. Thought I'd mention it. It deals with an application or program called Mythica VR. And it's a Kickstarter that has launched. It's got about 28 days to go. They're looking to raise 80 to 100,000. They've got about 5. And what they're trying to do is basically take all those elements of a campaign, combat, mapping, right, of your dungeon space, all that kind of stuff, and put that into VR. So very much like the augmented reality experience, except completely in VR. So again, really awesome potential for stuff like tabletop gaming, right? So there's an example of how both could do the same thing, but differently, right? Not the same way, and possibly both be awesome in different ways. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. There you have it, guys. That's the news for today. Cheers as always, and catch you on the flip side.